Rent prices are up, options are gone. And for a growing number of Australians, the last roof they control has 4 wheels and a steering wheel. This is what happens when the housing market closes without an exit. In 2026, cities aren't just expensive, they're compressed. People are being pushed into smaller spaces, shorter nights, and riskier routines, while rules tighten and patience runs out. Tonight, we're breaking down 10 Australian cities where rent pressure and car living are colliding in real time, and why the situation is spinning out of control. Let's start with number 10. Number 10, Adelaide. The trouble starts with small denials. The application that feels strong, then quietly loses to someone who offered more weeks up front. The inspection line that wraps around the block like a concert, except everyone is carrying the same anxious folder. The moment you realize the number on the listing is not a suggestion, it is a filter designed to make most people disappear before they can even ask a question. In this city, the crisis often wears a polite face. Streets look calm, commutes run, cafes stay full. That calm is why the pressure can grow for longer without being named. When a market tightens without shouting, people improvise without announcing it. They split households into smaller pieces. They accept couch schedules. They start sleeping near work because fuel is cheaper than being late, and being late is more expensive than pride. What makes the car living story hard to spot here is that the vehicles blend in. A hatchback can pass as an early shift. A utility vehicle can pass as a worker's rig. The line between "I am parked" and "I live here" becomes something you only detect through patterns. The same spot at the same hours, the same curtain made from a towel, the same careful avoidance of eye contact. And when neighbors do notice, the first response is rarely cruelty. It is routine. A call, a complaint, a request for someone to check. The check becomes a knock. The knock becomes a warning. Then the person learns the rule that matters most, not the written one, the unwritten one. Do not be visible for too long. The city does not explode all at once. It stretches. It becomes a place where ordinary people spend extraordinary energy just trying to look ordinary. And that is the kind of pressure that doesn't look like panic until the moment it suddenly does. Number 9, Canberra. At first it seems impossible. The cars are nicer, the suits are sharper, the public buildings are clean enough to look like a promise. When people imagine who gets squeezed out of housing, they rarely picture someone who still has a job badge, still has meetings, still has an alarm set for a morning that requires confidence. But the point of pressure is not always the paycheck. It is the gap between the paycheck and the gate. The gate is the bond, the advance rent, the prove you are safe documentation, and the competition from applicants who look identical on paper, except one has family money behind them. Once that gate rises, you can be employed and still be locked out. In the national capital, the car living story carries a particular kind of shame. People hide it behind language that sounds temporary. Between places, house sitting fell through, saving for something better. Sometimes that is true. Sometimes it is the story someone tells because the truth would change how they are treated at work. Here, the nightly routine often looks like a puzzle designed by someone who hates sleep. You park in one place long enough to rest, but not long enough to draw attention. You keep the vehicle tidy because mess invites scrutiny. You avoid the spots that feel unsafe, but also avoid the spots that feel too safe because those are the ones residents protect. The irony is that the city runs on paperwork, and the people living in cars become experts in the paperwork of invisibility. They keep receipts. They keep proof of insurance. They keep their lives compressed into containers that can be moved quickly if a ranger or security guard decides the street has changed categories overnight. The pressure does not just sit on the person living in the vehicle. It spreads outward. Co-workers notice exhaustion. Managers notice mistakes. Friendships get strained by half-truths. The stress becomes a leak that drips into everything. This is not the place where the crisis looks loud. It is the place where it looks like composure cracking quietly. And next, we step into a city where the scale is bigger, the rental hunt is louder, and the hiding becomes harder, even when you do everything right. If this feels uncomfortably real, subscribe now and tell us in the comments, is your city easing the pressure or making it worse? Number 8, Melbourne. You can feel it in the rituals. People schedule their lives around inspections like they are medical appointments. They carry references the way people carry identity. They talk about suburbs like they are lifeboats, calculating distance, safety, school zones, and price in the same breath. In a large city, the housing story has a trick. It can appear to be improving while still being brutal. A few more listings can show up, headlines can soften, and yet, on the ground, the competition stays sharp because the backlog is human, not theoretical. A market does not reset just because the graph stops climbing for a moment. Car living here often takes on a commuter disguise. The vehicle is parked near transport nodes, near industrial edges, near places where an overnight presence can be explained away as an early start or a late finish. People choose anonymity over comfort because comfort draws attention. There is also a cultural factor that makes this city's version feel uniquely tense, the sense that you are always being observed. Apartment towers look down on streets. Cameras sit above entrances. Lighting is brighter in the places you might want to rest. The city is alive late, which means the quiet hours are shorter. In this environment, the rule system becomes less about written fines and more about social friction. The person in the vehicle becomes a question in someone else's mind. That question becomes a post. The post becomes a conversation. And suddenly, what was invisible becomes a problem that demands a response. Some residents respond by pushing for stricter controls. Others respond by offering quiet support, a shower at a friend's place, a spare key for a toilet, a meal dropped off without questions. Both responses exist at the same time, and that collision shapes how the crisis evolves. The city does not run out of compassion, it runs out of patience. And patience is what you need when a crisis is not a single event, but a daily routine repeating until someone breaks. From here, we move to a place where the pressure has a different texture, faster, tighter, and harder to escape. A city where the shortage feels like a locked door that never stops being locked. Number 7, Perth. This story does not begin with a collapse. It begins with a plan that fails by inches. A person thinks they can handle a temporary spike. They think a few months of rent strain is survivable. Then the strain becomes the new baseline, and the baseline becomes a trap. In this city, the rental search can feel like chasing a moving target on a treadmill. You apply, you wait, you lose, you reapply. The time between each cycle is spent bleeding money in ways that do not look like rent but function like it. Fuel to keep moving, repairs to keep the vehicle reliable, and small purchases to maintain hygiene and normal appearance. Here, the car living pattern often spreads along the edges, where the city stops watching so closely. Wide streets, industrial precincts, places with fewer pedestrians, fewer complaints, fewer eyes. But those edges have their own costs. They are colder at night, they are less safe, they are farther from services, and they turn a basic need, sleep, into a risk calculation. The most dangerous part of this cycle is mechanical. A car used as shelter has to stay alive. It is not just transportation anymore, it is your walls. When that machine fails, the crisis changes shape instantly. The person does not just lose mobility, they lose the roof, the lock, and the ability to relocate when told. That is where the out-of-control feeling comes from. Not because there is chaos everywhere, but because the margin for error disappears. One punctured tire can become a catastrophe. One dead battery can trigger a chain reaction. Missed work, lost income, deeper instability, and even more desperate choices. In a tight market, people become more reactive. They take risks they would never take in a stable environment. They park where they know they should not. They drive when they should not. They accept arrangements that feel unsafe because they feel temporary. This is a city where the pressure teaches people to live in constant adjustment. And next is a place where the pressure is more extreme, the options narrower, and the crisis shows up in ways that do not stay hidden for long. Number 6, Darwin. You notice the climate first. Heat changes everything about survival. It changes where you can sleep, how long you can stay in a vehicle, and how quickly a night turns into a health problem. In this environment, a car can become shelter and hazard at the same time. When rent pressure collides with harsh conditions, the improvisations become sharper. People seek airflow, shade, and safety all at once, which is a rare combination. They rotate through spots not just to avoid attention, but to avoid overheating. They time rest around the weather, not the clock, and the clock still shows up anyway. In smaller capitals, the social map is tighter. Word travels faster. Familiar faces are recognized. That can cut both ways. It can mean faster help when someone is in trouble. It can also mean faster judgment when someone becomes visible. Once a pattern is noticed, it is hard to become invisible again. Here, the system can feel like pressures stacked on top of each other. First, the market says pay more. Then the environment says move carefully. Then social attention says do not stay too long. Finally, the body says, you cannot keep doing this. The vehicle becomes a compromise that never stops costing you. The compromise is not only financial, it is physical. You cannot sleep well in heat. You cannot work well without sleep. And when work slips, the rental gate becomes even higher. In a place like this, the debate about rules becomes more complicated. A rule that forces movement can become a rule that forces risk. A fine can become a health event. This is where the crisis feels less like a policy discussion and more like a survival problem unfolding in real time. And next, we go to a city where the size is smaller, the beauty is obvious, and the pressure hides behind the idea that a charming place cannot possibly be this cruel to ordinary renters. Number 5, Hobart. The first sentences people use to describe this place are usually affectionate. They talk about the air, the pace, and the feeling of escape. That is why the housing pressure lands with a particular shock. It breaks the story people want to tell about where they live. In a smaller city, scarcity behaves differently. A small shortage can feel like a large one because there are fewer alternatives. There are fewer suburbs to retreat into. There are fewer move a bit farther out options that still keep a job viable. When demand rises faster than supply, the squeeze becomes personal quickly. Car living here often sits in the shadows of that contradiction. A person is surrounded by beauty while living inside a cramped compromise. The contrast makes the situation feel surreal, which is why people sometimes speak about it in half jokes. They will say living the van life, as if the phrase can soften the reality. But the reality is not cinematic. It is logistical. Where do you shower? Where do you charge your phone? How do you keep your clothes clean enough to stay employable? How do you manage privacy when the walls are glass and anyone can look in? The community response also carries a unique tension. Some residents want to protect a sense of order that feels fragile. Others recognize the pattern and quietly try to help. The conflict is not always loud, but it is constant. It shows up in small decisions, whether someone is asked to move on, whether a parking space becomes contested territory, and whether compassion survives contact with inconvenience. This is where you can see the mental side of the crisis clearly. When you do not have stable housing, you do not just lose a roof, you lose the ability to plan. Life shrinks into short horizons. Tonight, tomorrow morning, the next inspection, and the next tank of fuel. And from here, we head into a city where the growth and ambition are visible, where the housing pressure spreads like a wave that touches almost everyone, even those who think they are insulated. Number 4, Brisbane. You can feel the energy in the streets, construction cranes, new cafes, more traffic, the sense that the city is becoming a bigger version of itself. Growth can be exciting, but growth also means competition. Competition is what turns housing into a fight. In this city, the rental squeeze often shows up as a reshuffling of entire lives. People move away from the places that keep them stable, work, family, school, and they tell themselves the trade is temporary. Temporary has a habit of becoming permanent when prices keep rising and availability keeps shrinking. Car living takes on many disguises here. Sometimes it is a family trying to stay near a child's school. Sometimes it is a worker trying to keep a commute that makes the job possible. Sometimes it is a person avoiding shared accommodation because safety has already been compromised before, and they refuse to risk it again. The pressure also creates a quiet marketplace of favors and fragile arrangements. A driveway is offered for a week. A friend's couch comes with conditions. A backyard shed becomes a room without being called one. A parking spot is allowed as long as nobody complains. Those arrangements can look like community. They can also look like exploitation, depending on who holds the power. When housing is scarce, the person with a stable address becomes a gatekeeper, even if they do not mean to be. The car becomes a fallback plan that feels controlled because it is yours. You can lock it, you can leave, you can keep your belongings close. That sense of control matters when everything else feels decided by someone else's approval. But control is fragile. A single complaint can erase it. A single new sign can change the rules overnight. And because the city is growing, the places where you can disappear safely often get developed, monitored, or regulated out of existence. This is where out of control starts to look like a moving boundary. What was possible last month is not possible this month. And next, we go somewhere that sells itself as a dream, a coastline, a lifestyle, a place people imagine as freedom, until you see how quickly that dream turns into a survival map after dark. Number 3, Gold Coast. It starts with the contrast: sunlight, towers, tourists, and the feeling that money is always nearby. In a place like this, it is easy to believe hardship must be rare because the surface looks wealthy, but the surface is not the whole city. Under the bright image, there is a quieter scramble for space. When housing is treated like a commodity in a lifestyle market, rent can start behaving like a ticket price. The people who keep the place running, hospitality staff, cleaners, security, and retail workers, begin to realize the city expects them to serve it without necessarily letting them live in it. Car living here has a particular geography. It follows the margins of the tourist zones. It clings to places with bathrooms nearby, places with lighting that feels safe but not so bright that it invites attention. People learn the rhythm of patrols, the way others learn the rhythm of waves. There is a different kind of public tension in a destination city. Visitors are less tolerant of discomfort because they did not come for reality. They came for escape. That can produce faster complaints and faster pressure on councils to clean up spaces that are meant to feel carefree. So the person in the vehicle becomes part of an image problem. Image problems are often handled with quick solutions. Quick solutions are rarely stable solutions. At the same time, this city can produce a strange kind of invisibility through sheer volume. When streets are busy, a parked car can blend in. When weekends are loud, someone can rest unnoticed, but that invisibility disappears in the quiet season, the quiet hours, and the quiet places. Then, the same vehicle becomes conspicuous simply because there are fewer distractions. What makes this unsettling is how normal it can look. Someone can work a shift, buy groceries, go to the gym for a shower, and then return to a car at night, like it is just another part of modern life. Normality is what makes a crisis durable. And next, we slide farther up the coast into a place where the pressure is shaped by growth, by rules, and by a tightening sense that alternative living is being squeezed from every direction, not just from rent. Number 2, Sunshine Coast. The story here is often told as a lifestyle choice. People talk about simple living, downsizing, and freedom. Those words can be true for some, but when rent pressure rises, choice becomes a cover that helps people survive socially, even when they are barely surviving financially. In this region, the crisis tends to spread across many small nodes instead of one giant center. That creates a scattered pattern: quiet streets, quiet car parks, and quiet corners where people hope to rest without becoming a topic of conversation. Scattered patterns are hard to count. Hard to count problems are easy to ignore until they suddenly become impossible to ignore. What makes the pressure feel sharper is that the alternatives are getting narrower. It is not only that rents rise, it is that the fallback options are debated, regulated, limited, or socially contested. If you cannot afford a lease, you look for something else. If something else becomes politically uncomfortable, it gets squeezed too. People begin moving through a ladder of compromises. First, they share a room. Then they share a lounge. Then they sleep in a car for a bit. Then they consider anything that floats or rolls. Then they discover those options have boundaries, fees, and enforcement too. The moment a compromise becomes visible, it attracts attention. Attention attracts rules. Rules push people into smaller, riskier spaces. That is the part many residents do not see. Pressure does not disappear when you tighten the system. It condenses. And that takes us to the final city, the one that pulls the whole story into focus because it sets the pace for prices, for competition, and for the kind of quiet desperation that can exist in plain sight. Number 1, Sydney. You can feel the gravity immediately. People talk about rent the way they talk about weather. Unavoidable, shaping every plan, always hovering over the next decision. In this city, housing is not just shelter. It is status, access, and a gatekeeper to everything else. The car living story here carries a particular intensity because space itself is contested. Streets are busy. Parking is valuable. Complaints form quickly. Patrols are common. That means the nightly routine becomes more strategic, more exhausting, and more likely to break down. Some people try to survive by building a private schedule that keeps them moving and keeps them unnoticed. They sleep in one area, then drive to another place to wash up, then head to work, then store belongings somewhere safer, then spend the evening circling for a spot that does not invite attention. From the outside, that can look like discipline. From the inside, it is a form of constant labor. The cost is not only fuel, it is attention, stress, and the feeling that you are always one mistake away from losing everything. The most brutal part is the compounding effect. A minor fine becomes a larger problem because you cannot pay it without sacrificing food or work tools. A larger problem becomes a serious threat because it attaches to the vehicle. And once the vehicle is threatened, the entire fragile stability collapses at once. Shelter, transport, documents, medications, the ability to get to work, and the ability to look normal enough to stay employed. This is where the public debate often breaks into two stories that barely touch each other. One story says the city must keep order. The other story says the city must keep people alive. Both stories speak truth. The conflict is what happens when order is pursued without exits, without a safe place to be tonight, and without a realistic path back into housing tomorrow. If you want the grounded way to think about these 10 cities in 2026, it is not chaos, it is compression. When rents rise and alternatives shrink, the pressure pushes people into smaller spaces, shorter nights, and riskier routines. The visible parts may shift street by street, but the hidden engine stays the same. A city can choose punishment, containment, or stability. It can clear a curb, or it can change the math that keeps refilling the curb. The question for you is simple. What is the first move your city should make this year? Managed safe parking, faster housing pathways, stronger prevention, or something else entirely? Let us know your thoughts in the comment below. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video.